We talked about a couple different things, but the main takeaways today, we're talking about how we use our frame in our connections. So we had the issue of leaders leading early, right? Yanking on your hand and then forcing you to go too fast. The goal is to choose how quickly the hand connection will impact my spine. If I'm dancing at my maximum, which would be the farthest my hand can get away from me without starting to affect, yes? If I dance at my maximum all the time, then as soon as someone pulls on my hand, it's gonna pull on my spine as well. But if I instead create some width, which is gonna be our preferred method for this, if I keep my hand closer to my spine or keep my spine closer to my hand, whichever perspective you're looking at it from, then if someone yanks on my hand, it will pull my elbow out, and then I can choose when I take my step. So I won't necessarily be directly following the hand. Instead, the hand is going to go, and then I will follow in, yes? In that context, we kind of talked about this idea, getting into more of a positive perspective on this, of length in your frame versus width in your frame. It's the same amount of water in the cup, it's just I have a very tall, long cup versus a very wide, flat cup, yes? And we talked about how this affects in a positive way, and talking about the difference between using my length to connect versus using my width to connect. We learned from our leader and from a couple different ways that length tends to communicate a more limited range of options. Width tends to communicate a wider range, only because width tends to facilitate more rotational aspects, whereas length is pretty much only linear, only directional, very one-sided, yeah? We talked a little bit about how leads who are lighter, if I want to kind of impose more timing, impose more correction on them, I will get very linear with my anchors, and they will be very ta-ta, so my leader can feel away and together, off we go. If I have a leader who's yanking a lot, I actually tend to keep my anchors very flat underneath me so that they can yank, and then I can go, yes?
Yes.
We had you dance with length versus width. We talked about how length can sometimes create more speed simply because my hands are closer to each other. There's a smaller range of motion, right? So I can boom, boom from one side to the other. Whereas if I'm wider, it's a longer range. I don't have as much time, and I have to cover wider space. So embracing, especially for you, when we started doing length versus width in your own personal frame, I found that your width was great, you'd set it, but then you would switch your angles very quickly, like you would in your basics with your length, which is how you normally dance, right? And in my length, switching shoulders is very simple to do. In my width, it's a lot harder and longer, right?
Right.
And what was neat was when we had you stay in the width and embrace whatever it is you were making, you stayed and created better shape and better transition that looked more controlled and more on purpose than maybe coming through creating width then immediately falling out of it.
Got it.
Yeah?
Yes.
Am I missing anything? How when I get into my anchor, what I do to open is instead of opening my elbow to open me up, which would affect directly to my spine if someone pulled on my arm, instead, I get to that and I get to my anchor and I'm gonna pull from my pectoral. So my elbow is gonna stay the same amount bent, but I'm gonna rotate and open the pec so that if they yank on my arm, the elbow takes up that space. Yes, so from the side, if I get to my 4 and I open this elbow, 5 and 6, and then someone yanks my arm, I'm stuck. If I get to that same exact shape, but I open from the pectoral here, someone yanks, they don't get straight to my spine. The game is choosing when, where, how much, how quickly my leader gets access from my hand to my spine. And my spine is all about my grounding, all that other stuff, right? So I choose when they get access. And if I'm constantly living at the edge of my frame, then they get access the whole time.
Got it.